Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we have some football to talk about today. Today, we're going to be talking about the NFL Combine as it has kicked off. Yesterday, we had some interviews from coaches and general managers, and also we're going to be breaking down some of the players that are skipping out that we will not be seeing starting tomorrow when the drills kick off. Should be fun. Should be a good episode. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. Glad to see you all this morning in the chat, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. Love spending my morning with you guys. You know the drill. You know the drill. We'll go ahead and start things off with just a discussion probably about some of the interviews yesterday. I think that's a great way to start things off today. Basically, there are some tidbits that I have decided to cover from yesterday's interviews. There's nothing too much going on here, but just some fun stuff as we do, as mentioned, get interviews from general managers, get interviews from head coaches. They usually spill the beans on a couple things that are either entertaining, interesting, or provide some insight into what's going on kind of on that team. So we'll start with my favorite quote from the Combine yesterday, and it is from Bills general manager Brandon Beane. He was asked about just kind of reflecting on the move to trade up for Josh Allen, and this is what he said. We got criticized a little bit for how much we gave up for Josh, and I was like, well, if he doesn't work out, I'm not going to be here anyway. And if he does work out, nobody's going to give a shit. Love it. Love it. Absolutely candid quote from Brandon Beane. And I think that is probably insight into how a lot of general managers work when we see these crazy moves. They're probably like, F it, if this fails, I'm not even going to have this job anymore, and it doesn't even matter. But I want to, try to get the quarterback, try to find the future pieces to get this team where it needs to be. And I like the kind of balls to the wall mentality from Brandon Beane, and I'm glad it worked out for him. It seems like it wouldn't have mattered if it didn't work out. He said, I just wouldn't have this job anymore. So it's not like it matters too much for him. But still, very cool quote from him. Very fun, entertaining quote. And we'll see what happens if any other general managers kind of start using this balls to the wall attitude, no apologies given type deal. Another rumor that's going on from the NFL Combine from yesterday is the Commanders. The Commanders are rumored to be aggressively pursuing the number 1 overall pick off of the Chicago Bears. We know from a few weeks back that the Bears would be looking for at least the 102 and probably next year's first if they were to move off of the 101, even though it's only one spot back. If the Commanders are willing to pay that, I'm sure the Bears would be very, very happy. They got that ransom last year. If they could get another King's ransom this year, then they are really, really sitting pretty going to the future. And they can still get one of these top quarterbacks. And I think something that we might talk about a little later is, maybe the Bears, if they do move back, could find themselves being able to tackle both Jayden Daniels and Malik Nabers and get them both on their team, keeping that connection alive. That's something that could be really cool if they do move back from the 101. So either way, the Commanders maybe not as set in stone as Drake May, as a lot of people are suggesting. If they're trying to move to the 101, they probably want Caleb Williams, and they're not totally sold on either Daniels or Drake May as of now. But that's what the Combine's for. That's what this whole pre-draft interview process is for. We'll probably see how this develops over the next few weeks. Then lastly, I've got a couple more quotes from you, all kind of pertaining to the same thing. We'll start with Raheem Morris. Yesterday, he was asked about Atlanta and how competitive he thinks Atlanta could be next season, how close they are to contention. And Raheem Morris said, if we had better quarterback play, I may not even be standing here at the podium. That's an incredible quote from him. I love the candidness from that. And it makes you feel almost a little bit bad for Arthur Smith, as that's pretty much everyone's consensus belief here is that if the Falcons just had even a little bit better quarterback play, they would have probably been in the playoffs and maybe even contending with, the defense playing pretty well and all those weapons that they have. But it didn't happen. Now we have a new head coach in Atlanta with Raheem Morris, and they're working to solve that quarterback problem, which leads me to the final quote that I found interesting from yesterday. Bears general manager Ryan Poles was asked about Justin Fields and basically assured us and Justin Fields that he will be transparent with him throughout the process. Poles mentioned that they aim to do right by Fields if they do trade him, if that's the option that they decide to go. As we know, trading Justin Fields to Atlanta would be the most do right by Justin Fields type move. I still really firmly believe that's going to happen. Manifesting it wherever I can. Justin Fields is going to be an Atlanta Falcon next season. Thank you for the hint, Ryan Poles. So that's all the kind of fun little quotes from yesterday. Let's go ahead and dive into today's topic, the rookies skipping out on the NFL Combine. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and hear from the Dynasty Dominator.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
The Dynasty Dominator app is one of the best on the market. All of the rookies will be added shortly after the Combine, so go ahead and start getting ready for that app to keep you ahead in your Dynasty leagues. The last thing I want to mention before we get into the players skipping out, if you want to learn about the players not skipping out, if you want a nice little preview into this NFL Scouting Combine, then at 11 a.m. Eastern, right after this show, Maddie Kiwoom and Cody Carpentier will be having an episode of Blue Chips, previewing the Combine, talking about everything you need to know from the players that will be there. I'm sure some stuff on the players that will not be there, what to expect from interviews, all of that fun stuff will be covered on Blue Chips at 11 a.m. Do not miss it. It will be live on YouTube at 11. It will also be hitting our Twitter account as well if you want to watch over there. But either way, you do not want to miss that episode. Maddie Kiwoom and Cody Carpentier are boots on the ground at the NFL Combine, so look out for their content for the rest of the week and weekend. Go follow them at Cody Carpentier, at Maddie Kiwoom on Twitter, and just stay tuned to the Player Profiler Twitter as well. So the players skipping out on the Combine in the title is Malik Nabers, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Jayden Daniels. And I decided also to discuss a little bit about Jonathan Brooks since he'll be missing with an injury. That's obviously a little bit different than just plain out skipping it, but still, he's not going to be there. We need to learn a little bit about him. This is the best place to do it. We'll start, of course, with Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. is expected to be, basically one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen. An insane prospect. Skipping out on the Combine makes a ton of sense from him. He has really nothing to prove. Marvin Harrison Jr. could probably even be the number one overall pick if it wasn't such a high quarterback class. Like, he is that good of a prospect. Lots of people are clamoring for him in Dynasty, in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. is basically a can't-miss prospect. The last 2 seasons at Ohio State, he's had 1,200 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns exactly. So 1,400 something receiving yard or 2,400 receiving yards and 28 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. And what's remarkable about that is he did it with 2 different quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, of course, 2 seasons ago. And then the Ohio State quarterback's name is escaping me right now. But last year's quarterback, both of them got Marvin Harrison Jr. to 1,200 plus yards and 14 touchdowns. That's an incredible feat, and that helped Marvin Harrison Jr. win the Biletnikoff Award, which is basically the best wide receiver in the country. And even more incredible about Marvin Harrison Jr. is he's got really good size. He's 205 pounds, which is basically the prototypical weight of a wide receiver. But generally, when you see that size, they're like 6 foot, 6'1". But Marvin Harrison Jr. is also 6'4", so he's very, very tall and still slender and fast. So he's got really good contested catch skills. He's got really good route running. He's really got everything you want from a wide receiver. And it makes sense given it's Marvin Harrison's son. Last season, he was the only wide receiver to go for over 100 yards against the Michigan Wolverines. They locked down every wide receiver they played against, even Rome Odunze in the national championship. Michigan was stopping wide receivers left and right, and they could not stop Marvin Harrison Jr. He had 1,500-yard games over his career, which is a franchise record at Ohio State. Just such a good player. And even his freshman year, true freshman season from Marvin Harrison Jr., he scored 3 touchdowns off of only 11 receptions on a team with Garrett Wilson, with Chris Olave, with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was still getting it done in a star-studded cast. And to really bring it all home, this guy was expected to run a 4.3 if he was to do the drills at the NFL Combine. Even a low 4.4 would have been solid. But at 6'4", running a sub 4.4 40-yard dash with all the stats he had in college, with multiple quarterbacks, he's going to be incredible. Very excited to see where he goes. Going to be a can't-miss prospect. Easily the 101 in single quarterback rookie drafts, and arguably still the 101 in super flex drafts. It'll probably still be Caleb Williams, but I think in some people are just going to go for Marvin Harrison Jr. just to lock in that elite receiver. And in terms of landing spots, I really do believe that he ends up on the Cardinals. I know I've seen some mock drafts recently where he goes to the Patriots, but I really do think that the first 3 picks will be Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jayden Daniels, in whatever order it ends up being. And then the Cardinals get happy, get lucky, and have Marvin Harrison Jr. fall to them there at the 104. I think that's a great landing spot, not only for Marvin Harrison Jr., but for the rest of the team. I will go ahead and say trade for Kyler Murray while you still can. That guy, if he gets Marvin Harrison Jr., his value is going to skyrocket, and he's going to perform like that as well. So get Kyler Murray and get ready for Marvin Harrison Jr. He's going to be incredible. Sad we can't see him at the Combine. He's not even doing a pro day. Like, we're not going to see him really at all until next season, but still a can't-miss prospect. Looks incredible. Fantastic stats. Fantastic resume. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a true stud. Malik Nabers, I feel like a lot of people are putting him into the Marvin Harrison Jr. tier, and I can't go that far. I really can't. I know Malik Nabers had an incredible season, but he hasn't done it as consistently as Marvin Harrison Jr. did, factually, right? Malik Nabers, of course, had a better season last year with 1,569 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. Just absolutely unbelievable production. But the year before, he only had 3 touchdowns and 1,000 yards, which 1,000 yards is still, of course, good. But there's just a massive increase in last season, which gives me some pause. I think ultimately Malik Nabers is going to be really good. But the fact that he didn't really perform very well until Jayden Daniels randomly performed well, which is something we'll get into a minute, scares me a little bit. It really does scare me a little bit that his best season was the season his quarterback won the Heisman, and by a wide margin. 3 touchdowns to 14 touchdowns is a massive leap. But the dude was unbelievable last season. He only had 3 games last year under 100 yards, even had a monster 239-yard, 2-touchdown game, and 171 yards and a touchdown against Alabama. Just lights out all season. And fast as well. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds. So that's kind of the prototypical wide receiver. And he ran a 4.4 40 in high school. So he's expected, if he were to do the Combine, to run a 4.3 similar to Marvin Harrison. Great prospect for sure. I just have a little bit of concern with him taking such a big leap when Jayden Daniels did. Of course, that's probably what should and makes sense that it happened with a quarterback taking that big of a leap. But it does just give me some pause because it's the same story with Brian Thomas as well. He went from 5 touchdowns to 17 touchdowns. And that's just such a massive leap in one season that I don't know if that's the Malik Nabers that we're going to get at the NFL or the Brian Thomas that we would get at the NFL. I feel like it's, somewhere in between this. Like, I think still a really good wide receiver, but perhaps not generational, perhaps not anywhere really near the Marvin Harrison Jr. tier. I really do think that Marvin Harrison Jr. should be in a tier of his own. I do think Malik Nabers will still be a top 10 draft pick. And the one I'm thinking is the Bears. I think the Bears will be using their 2nd draft pick on Malik Nabers. I believe that's number 9. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think that's overdrafting at all. I think Malik Nabers is a great prospect at that draft pick. I just, like I said, have a little bit of pause for him taking such a massive leap, but ultimately that's going to come from Jayden Daniels. And mostly my pause should maybe just be with Jayden Daniels, who has now played 5 seasons at the college level and really didn't do anything special until last year when he won the Heisman Trophy. He spent 3 years at Arizona State, was fine. 2,000 yards, actually 3,000 yards his freshman year. So that's really, really good. 17 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions before kind of getting injured, it looks like, with 700 yards, and then bouncing back to 2,300 yards, and then transferring to LSU, throwing for 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions again. So just kind of average, solid stats. And then last season just exploded. Jayden Daniels last season threw for 3,812 pass yards, 40 passing touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, and added 1,134 rush yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. So putting him over 5,000 total yards last season, 50 touchdowns with only 5 turnovers. Last year, he led the country in yards, touchdowns, yards per play, passing efficiency with only 5 turnovers. Also led in quarterback rating at 95.6. Really great touchdown to interception ratio at 40-4. And he ranks 3rd time amongst all Heisman winners in total yards and touchdowns per game. So he had the 5,000 yards and averaged 4.17 touchdowns a game last season. Just unbelievable production for him last year. And that's just kind of why I'm a little concerned, is that it kind of just came out of nowhere. Hopefully that just means that he's a really hard worker and everything just fell into place and he finally started clicking and working on everything he needed to. I mean, that's what it suggests, especially when you've been in college for now 5 years. You would hope, after being in there for so long, that you can break out. The only thing that's going to make me concerned here is that, similar to Michael Penix, similar to Bo Nix, these quarterbacks that broke out so late, I feel like it's going to be hard for them to break out in the NFL early. I think that Jayden Daniels is a quarterback that's probably going to take a season to get things right, which is okay. That's totally fine. That used to be how we viewed rookies in the NFL, is that their rookie season would be kind of a lost year where they're learning the game. And then in year 2, year 3 is when they finally do break out. So I would just say with Jayden Daniels, while he had an electric season, while he was fantastic last year, I really do believe that it's probably going to take some time for him at the NFL level. And I do have a little bit of pause. But the fact that he has multiple skill sets, ran for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year, on top of a really good touchdown to interception ratio, that makes him a very, very good prospect. I do think he'll be a top 3 pick. And I think he will go to the Patriots. I think that the Patriots are ready to make a kind of philosophy switch when it comes to the quarterback, move kind of away from the pocket passer, get a little bit more unique. And Jayden Daniels can, kind of compete at the AFC East with the Josh Allens, with the Tua Tagovailoas, with, I guess, Aaron Rodgers. I really do think that that'd be a really good landing spot for Jayden Daniels and the Patriots at number 3. And that's also just because we have the rumors that the Bears are probably getting Caleb Williams, and then the Commanders are probably getting Drake May. I think the Patriots take Jayden Daniels. I think he'll be okay. And it also kind of just is good, right? The Patriots kind of going through a rebuild year, getting their feet wet with this new head coach regime and everything. Having a quarterback that's probably also going to need that year to learn makes a lot of sense. Everyone kind of growing together. The Patriots could also get a really good wide receiver early in the second, or maybe bring someone in from free agency. Either way, I think that's a solid landing spot, and it would kind of mark a new beginning for this New England Patriots team. So then we'll move on to Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams is interesting to me as well, because after having a fantastic season, he fell off a little bit. I mean, the efficiency numbers were still there. He went from averaging 9.1 yards per attempt his sophomore year to 9.4 yards per attempt. But he threw 100 less pass attempts and had almost 1,000 less yards, less touchdowns, the same amount of interceptions. So it was a little bit of a concerning junior year for him. And it's possible that, maybe, he's just coming off the Heisman Trophy winning. And it's just like, I've done enough. I don't want to get hurt, and I damn sure don't want to hurt my draft stock in any way. He's still probably going to be the 101. He's still viewed as a generational prospect pretty widely. I just don't know if I'm going to go so far as saying he's a generational prospect. I think that word has been thrown around way too loosely these days. I think he's just a really, really good quarterback prospect. He's 6'1", 215 pounds, so he's got decent size and weight. But what concerns me is that last year versus ranked opponents, he only had one good game against ranked opponents, and that was against Washington. Versus Notre Dame, ranked 21 at the time, he threw for 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions and only 199 yards. Against number 14 Utah, he threw for 0 touchdowns and 256 yards. And then against Washington, he had 3 touchdowns, no turnovers, and 300 yards. So that was a really good game. But then he bounced back against Oregon the following week and only threw for 1 touchdown and 291 yards. That's kind of where I find some concern when I look at Caleb Williams' stats against ranked opponents, is they're not that great last season. They were pretty solid his sophomore year when he won the Heisman, but there was clearly a drop-off in his production last year, which, I don't really think means much at the end of the day, but definitely something to mention. Because, when he won the Heisman, it was basically one of the best seasons we've ever seen. He broke USC's record for pass yards, throwing for 4,537, 42 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. Really great year by him, especially since he also added 10 rushing touchdowns and 382 rush yards. So what that shows us is that Caleb Williams is a quarterback that can scramble, doesn't necessarily scramble all the time, but when he does, he's highly effective. He had 113 carries his sophomore year, 97 last year. Really only averaged 3.4 yards, 1.4 yards, but scored touchdowns, 10 and 11 rushing touchdowns the last 2 seasons. So 21 total touchdowns on the ground the last 2 years. Really, really good performance from him. And I think that that's going to help him a lot at the NFL level. It basically reminds me of like a Patrick Mahomes a little bit, right? Where he can scramble just a little bit, especially when the game gets tough, and get that first down, get that touchdown, get outside and keep the play alive. That's what makes you a really, really good quarterback. And I know comparing him to Patrick Mahomes probably isn't the best thing in the world, considering how good Patrick Mahomes is. But I think that that's probably the closest comparable when I think about it, just because, slight scrambling ability, really strong arm, great stats. That's pretty Patrick Mahomes to me. So either way, that's Caleb Williams looks like a really, really good quarterback. Obviously, that's not a hot take. I'm a little concerned about the stat drop off from years, or from his Heisman year to the next year. But mostly that's going to come from him throwing the ball 100 less times. That's going to affect your stats and output in general. So yeah, that's Caleb Williams. We will now move on to the final player that will not be at the Combine, and that is Jonathan Brooks. The first 4 were actually choosing to skip out. Jonathan Brooks unfortunately tore his ACL and didn't necessarily have a choice. But I still did just want to shine the light on him a little bit, as he is viewed by a lot of people, especially if he didn't get injured, the best running back prospect in this draft class. So he's a Texas running back, and he's marked as a sophomore, but technically he's a junior. He's been there for 3 years, but just hasn't had much of a chance to shine because he's behind Bijan Robinson. He was behind Roschon Johnson. But last year, with them gone, he ran for 1,139 rush yards and had 286 receiving yards with 11 total touchdowns. Really solid stat line, had 25 total receptions, which is a really decent benchmark. It shows that he's maybe not the most capable pass catcher in the world, but he can certainly still do it, which is just exactly what you want to see, really. I view like 20 receptions as really what I'm looking at to see if a running back can do it. And 25 is right above that. It's solid. It's not the best, but it's pretty decent. And I think that Jonathan Brooks is, at the end of the day, an all-purpose running back. He's got really good size at 6 foot, 207 pounds. And last year he only had one game with less than 94 total yards. I know I had to kind of skew that a bit because he had 94 yards for one game and all of the others were over 100. But either way, 94 yards has kind of been a really good mark for running backs, really ever. If a player's getting into the 90 yardage as a running back, then you're really, really good. And he did that every single game except once, which is just phenomenal output from Jonathan Brooks. He scored in every single game last year as well, except for 2. And he's expected to run about the mid 4.4s if he were to perform at this Combine, which shows he has some decent size on top of his decent speed on top of his decent strength. So that is Jonathan Brooks. Wish we could see him at the Combine. Not like a ton to cover here when we talk about him, just because he got injured, just because he's really only had 1 season. But with him only having 1 season, he will have a ton of tread on his tires. And I do think that he will be a value in our rookie drafts and probably a value in the real NFL draft as well. With a really good landing spot, Jonathan Brooks could definitely be special. So that's kind of my rundown on the players that will not be at this year's Combine. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's go ahead and answer just a few questions before we get you out of here. Scrap Iron FF asks, how do I feel about Spencer the Rattler? You believe he will be a good pro. This is going to be very hard to hear But I was generally not that impressed with Spencer Rattler when I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He's pretty short, which I guess hasn't been a death sentence for quarterbacks before, but and he scrambles, so that definitely helps with his height. But ultimately, I believe Spencer Rattler's ceiling, this is crazy to say, and maybe not in terms of skill, but just in terms of career trajectory, it's like a Desmond Ridder. I think that Spencer Rattler will probably be drafted to a team that will take a chance on a mid-round rookie quarterback, let him sit for at least half the season, maybe the full season, and depending on his landing spot, could start in year 2. And I think ultimately when and if he gets that chance to start, he'll show a few flashes, but will never, ever, ever really do enough to be a true franchise quarterback. What I saw from Spencer Rattler at the Senior Bowl was he stayed in the pocket for way too long. He frequently locked onto his first read, whether that be a running back or just a tight end doing a short route. He was very generally afraid to throw the ball down the field and push it at all, really up until day 3. And even then, the only time he really did push the ball downfield was one wide receiver, Jamari Thrash, who's just an excellent route runner. Or in day 2, he sometimes threw it to his former South Carolina teammate, Xavier Legette. But even then, the throws just weren't that great. I think what a lot of people liked from Spencer Rattler at the Senior Bowl especially was how he interviewed. He does have a ton of swagger around him that makes him an enticing prospect and person to speak to. And he kind of just like has this aura about him. But his play style to me, his height for me, really everything was a bit concerning. And also he was asked like the day 1 of the Senior Bowl, one word to describe himself. And he described himself as elite. And I don't know. I don't like throwing that word around a lot, especially when I'm using it to describe myself, a guy who hadn't really performed at the college level that well. It seems a bit too cocky to me, and I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not too in on Spencer Rattler, to be completely honest with you guys. It's Chuka Baby says that you have the 104 and 1 QB and 106 in Superflex. Odunze may be the pick over Bowers if both are there at those picks. Yeah, I mean, I'm not against taking the wide receiver over the tight end. I know that Brock Bowers projects to be a really, really good prospect. But if you tuned into the Sonic Truth this week with the Podfather, he highlighted just how concerned he is with his weight. He might not even weigh 240 pounds, which is kind of that benchmark to be a successful tight end in the NFL. He's a different type of prospect, so ultimately he could come away with it. But we have to remember, everyone. We have to remember, last year was an anomaly. Seeing Dalton Kincaid, seeing Sam Laporta, seeing these rookie tight ends play so well was an anomaly. We don't see that very often. Generally, with tight ends, it takes some time. And that's what's happening, right? With like Kyle Pitts, for example. Like everyone has just completely come off the guy because he's taken 3 years. But it used to take 4 or 5 years for a tight end to really, really click. We've become impatient because we got treated to some great tight ends last year. I do think that ultimately the right process is to continue with that. Take wide receivers over tight ends. If the tight end hits, then you can trade for them. But it's a really, really risky asset. It's a really, really risky asset. If Brooks played behind Roschon, would that make Roschon the number 1 RB in this class? I don't think so. I think that was more just a timing thing than anything. It's Chuka says, I'll continue to bang the drum for Ricky Pearsall. This guy has I don't know how I feel about Ricky Pearsall, to be completely honest with you. He showed some flashes at the Senior Bowl. He did not interview that well to me. He had this, I don't know, his personality was off to me. I don't think he should have stopped practicing at the Senior Bowl. I don't know where the confidence came from. He was all right, showed some flashes, but also had some bad plays as well. I think he's going to be landing spot dependent for sure. Which is going to be the case with a lot of players. I mean, like we have really, really good athletes, but situation is very, very important. And I do think that ultimately for Ricky Pearsall, we're going to want to see a good landing spot, for me at least, to get pretty excited about him. So that seems to be it. Let me really quickly check Instagram. I do not see, Tony Pollard, trade or keep. Probably just hold on to him. I don't know what you can really get. And at this point, he's still a really, really good athlete. We saw him towards the end of the year when he became fully healthy, be the Tony Pollard that we wanted him to be. So I think that Tony Pollard is probably still fine, probably the definition of a hold in Dynasty. All right, everyone. That was today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was another fun episode of The Wake and Take. And you guys were a fantastic audience, as always. I will see you all tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll be joined by a very special guest, so make sure you get ready for that. We'll be live on the Player Profiler YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, 10 a.m. Eastern. Don't forget to like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to Player Profiler. You guys all have a wonderful Wednesday and a great rest of your week. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.